Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sonova and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. World Economic Forum annual meeting starts in Davos. At least 39 people have been killed and dozens more injured after two trains derailed in southern Spain. And Syria announces nationwide ceasefire as army and Kurdish-led STF report ongoing clashes. The annual World Economic Forum opens in Davos as world leaders gather to discuss key political and economic challenges. Organizers say the event will feature the largest ever U.S. delegation led by President Donald Trump.
Business and political leaders gathers in Davos for the World Economic Forum's annual meeting as the global rules-based economic order faces growing pressure. The 56th edition of the forum, running from January 19th to 23rd, is being held under the theme A Spirit of Dialogue. Forum leaders say dialogue is essential at a time of rising geopolitical tensions and economic uncertainty. US President Donald Trump is expected to attend, leading the largest American delegation in Davos history. It will include senior cabinet members, Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and a bipartisan group from Congress. World Economic Forum President Borge Brende said dialogue is not a luxury but a necessity, though critics argue the forum risks losing relevance as major powers pursue national interests. More than 3,000 delegates from over 130 countries are expected, including 64 heads of state and government, with key discussions focusing on global trade, geopolitics, and artificial intelligence. Organizers say the meeting aims to help leaders find common ground and shape cooperation for the future.
Ukraine's top negotiator Rustem Umerov said on Sunday that talks with U.S. officials on a resolution of the war with Russia would continue at the World Economic Forum opening this week in the Swiss resort of Davos. Meanwhile, President Zelensky said Kiev was fully informing Washington about Moscow's continued strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure.
There were reports today from our delegation in the United States. Rustem Umerov briefed on meetings with representatives of President Trump. Several rounds of negotiations have already taken place, and work is underway on the documents needed to end the war. It is important that the Ukrainian team fully informs the American side about what is happening in Ukraine and about Russia's constant strikes on our energy system. If the Russians truly and seriously wanted to end the war, they would focus on diplomacy rather than missile attacks, blackouts, and attempts to cause damage even to our nuclear power plants. We have data on the facilities that Russia has conducted reconnaissance on. Reconnaissance in preparation for strikes. Everything clearly shows that diplomacy is definitely not a priority for Russia. This must be acknowledged. Pressure must continue on the aggressor and on the real cause of this war. The cause is in Moscow. This week, we will work to increase such pressure and to ensure a clear global position on Russia.
Gold and silver, two of the world's most reliable assets, have hit record highs amid tensions between the United States and Europe over Greenland. President Donald Trump's tariff threats on 8 European countries have shaken markets, sending investors rushing to these precious metals for security.
Gold and silver prices surged to record highs on Monday as investors flocked to safe haven assets. Spot gold rose 1.6% to more than $4,670 an ounce. Silver jumped 4.4% to more than $93 after peaking at $94.8. It comes after US President Donald Trump's threats to impose extra tariffs on European countries over the control of Greenland. He announced a 10% import levy from the 1st of February, rising to 25% from the beginning of June, if no agreement is reached over the world's largest island. European leaders condemned the move as blackmail. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen both criticised the plan, warning it could weaken NATO alliances and disrupt trade agreements. France also suggested possible economic countermeasures. On Sunday, Starmer says he spoke to Trump after talking with the Danish Prime Minister, EU and NATO leaders to caution him that imposing tariffs on allies is wrong. Meanwhile, European Union ambassadors say they've reached a broad agreement on Sunday to intensify efforts to dissuade Trump's tariffs from being imposed. They say they're also preparing retaliatory measures in case the duties do go ahead.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has held a phone call with US President Donald Trump as tensions rise over proposed trade tariffs and controversial remarks on Greenland. The discussion comes amid strong European warnings that such moves could strain transatlantic relations and undermine respect for sovereignty and international law.
UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has spoken with US President Donald Trump amid plans to impose 10% tariffs on the UK and several European allies, a move that has raised diplomatic and trade concerns. The call comes as Donald Trump has again suggested the United States should acquire Greenland, prompting swift responses across Europe. Danish authorities have reiterated that Greenland is not for sale and that its future must be decided by the people of Greenland. In London, Sir Keir Starmer stressed the importance of respecting sovereignty and international law, saying territorial integrity cannot be used as leverage in global politics. He has repeatedly stated that Greenland's future should be determined by its own people and by Denmark. The comments follow Trump's announcement of proposed tariffs on the UK and other European countries. Trump has linked the move to broader disagreements involving Greenland, so no negotiations or legal mechanism for any purchase exist. 8 countries named in the tariff proposal said in a joint statement on Sunday that the threatened measures could undermine transatlantic relations and risk escalation. The statement, issued by Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden and the UK, said the countries stand in full solidarity with the Kingdom of Denmark and the people of Greenland, while reaffirming their commitment to Arctic security. Zeina Farizadeh, A-News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
At least 39 people have been killed and dozens more injured after a high-speed train derailed and collided with another service near the city of Cordoba in southern Spain. Rescue operations continued into the night with rail links between Madrid and Andalusia suspended as investigators begin work.
A high-speed train has derailed near Cordoba, Spain, colliding with another service and leaving dozens killed and injured. Authorities have suspended rail links between Madrid and southern Spain. The accident happened around 7:45 p.m. when the rear of an Irio train from Malaga to Madrid derailed, crossed onto the opposite track and struck a Renfe train heading from Madrid to Huelva. Officials says the rear of the Irio train slammed into the front of the Renfe service, knocking carriages off the tracks and down a 4-metre slope. At least 4 wagons were fully derailed, with the Renfe train's front section sustaining the worst damage. The Irio train was carrying around 300 passengers and the Renfe train had about 200. 73 injured passengers were taken to hospitals across Andalusia. Rescue teams worked through the night in a hard-to-access area, assisted by local residents, Spain's military emergency units, firefighters and the Red Cross. All survivors have now been rescued, though officials warn that additional victims could still be found. Rail services between Madrid and Andalusia will remain suspended while investigators look into the cause of the crash. The investigation could take up to a month.
Over to the Portuguese presidential elections, where former Socialist Party leader António José Seguro has taken the lead in the first round, ahead of far-right rival André Ventura. The final result will be decided in a runoff next month.
Moderate socialist António José Seguro is leading the first round of Portugal's presidential election, with far-right leader André Ventura in second, according to exit polls and partial results. With nearly 80% of votes counted, Seguro has just over 30%, Ventura 25.6%, and João Coutrinho de Figueiredo of the pro-business Liberal Initiative likely came third with 16 to 21%. Ventura's Chega party, founded 7 years ago, has quickly become the main opposition in parliament, campaigning on strong anti-immigration policies. Ventura says he wants to unite the right and prevent another socialist president.
We can't spend the whole year criticising things, or the whole decade criticising things, and then stay silent on the day we're called on to decide. We have to make choices for the country, and today, whether the choice is one or the other, what matters is voting. Democracy wins when we vote, when we choose, when we participate.
Analysts say Ventura's appeal is limited beyond his core supporters, and polls suggest he is likely to lose the runoff. The runoff is scheduled for February 8th. It's only the second in 40 years, reflecting growing political fragmentation. While largely ceremonial, Portugal's presidency still holds key powers, including vetoing laws and dissolving parliament.
U.S. President Donald Trump wants countries to pay $1 billion to gain permanent membership on the Board of Peace overseeing Gaza. The draft document obtained by Bloomberg shows members who do not pay will have a maximum 3-year term.
60 countries have been sent a draft charter proposing a new Board of Peace to oversee Gaza. According to the document sent by the Trump administration and seen by Reuters, nations would pay $1 billion for a permanent seat. Those who do not contribute would be limited to 3-year terms. All funds are earmarked for Gaza's reconstruction. US President Donald Trump would chair the board for life. Confirmed members include former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, senior advisor Jared Kushner, and World Bank President Ajay Banga. However, analysts see a broader ambition behind the billion-dollar price tag, since the draft mentions the board can later expand it to deal with other conflicts.
So it's clear that Gaza might be the beginning, but it isn't the end of the Board of Peace as far as the Trump administration is concerned. And it may, that secondary role of kind of replacing existing multilateral institutions might even be more of a priority than its primary function in Gaza for this administration, since Gaza doesn't really have any real strategic value for Donald Trump.
Day-to-day governance in Gaza would be handled by a Palestinian technocratic committee, but the main Board of Peace includes no Palestinian representatives, raising concerns that the structure could sideline local interest.
So their priority is to destroy Hamas, and not to govern Gaza or to stabilize Gaza. And in fact, those two missions are in conflict. So where will the Board of Peace land? Will they adopt Israel's definition of stability, which is to restrict aid or to condition aid on compliance with its own terms?
Many rights experts and advocates have also said that Trump overseeing a board to supervise a foreign territory's governance resembles a colonial structure, while Blair's involvement has drawn criticism due to his role in the Iraq War and the legacy of British imperialism in the Middle East.
South Korean President Lee Jae-myung and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni held a summit in Seoul on Monday, agreeing to expand cooperation in areas including artificial intelligence, aerospace, semiconductors, and critical minerals. The two countries signed a memorandum of understanding on cooperation in the semiconductor industry, including applications linked to artificial intelligence. Meloni and Lee also discussed collaboration on joint research projects and exchanges, and reaffirmed their commitment to the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss Portugal's presidential runoff, the Segura Ventura face-off, and what it means for democracy. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Portugal is heading toward a decisive presidential runoff after a surprise first-round result. Former Socialist Party leader Antonio José Seguro has emerged on top, setting up a face-off with far-right Chega leader André Ventura. An election now seen as a key test for Portuguese democracy and the limits of populist politics. To unpack the results and what lies ahead, I'm joined by Jorge Costa Oliveira, political analyst speaking to us from Lisbon, Portugal. Jorge, welcome to the program.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So, Mr. Oliveira, how significant is Antonio José Seguro's first-round victory in the context of Portugal's recent political history? And why did pre-election polls fail to fully anticipate the dynamics of this first round?
Well, to be fair, it was the most competitive election in a long time, president's election in a long time. About 2 weeks ago, there were 5 candidates that either of them could go into the runoff. So currently in Portugal, the right has a majority, which is clearly shown in the parliament. More than 2/3 of the members of the parliament belong to right-wing, from center-right to far-right parties. But this led to a split on the number of candidates from the right, and that is what allowed António José Seguro, which is a member of the Socialist Party, which is a center-left party, to get to the round-off. But this also comes from the dynamic of the campaign itself. He was discreet. There were not a lot of criticism, and no polemics, no skeletons in the wardrobe. So this allowed him to capitalize in the last 2 days on voting from people from minor parties that traditionally would go into minor left parties, to concentrate the vote on him. And this allowed him not only to go to the second round, but the runoff, but to win the first round.
Jorge, what factors explain André Ventura's ability to secure nearly a quarter of the vote?
Well, he already had done that twice in the legislative elections. I'd say it's part of a wave that is going through the West, including Western Europe, and it's but he's more or less stuck at 23-25%. He comes to these elections. Many of us do not believe that he really wants to be president of the Republic, because the real power in Portugal does not lie, although the system constitutionally is a semi-presidential one. True power lies in the parliament, and especially in the government that emanates from the parliament. So in this case, the generalized idea, or the prevailing idea, is that he's running in order to concentrate more and more votes, so that later in the legislative election, he can claim to depart not from 20 or 25%, but from 30 or 33%, and try to win a legislative election. That is his real goal, in my opinion, not really to win the presidential election. He seeks real power. On the other hand, why 25%? Because Portugal is not immune to social networks and the populist speech in general. It's a bit ridiculous in the sense that, unlike France or Germany, for instance, we do not have large populations that still uphold cultural roots that are not in line with the majority of the population, and especially the campaign that Chega has done and André Ventura have done, somewhat racist and anti-immigration, here does not really bode well. Not only Portugal needs immigrants, and this is generally acknowledged as necessary, but the bulk of the huge majority of the immigrants that come to Portugal, they come from Portuguese-speaking countries, and their integration is not that complicated. I'd say half of them come from Brazil, many come from Angola, Mozambique, Cape Verde. So he made a campaign saying this is not Bangladesh. The number of Bangladeshi immigrants in Portugal is very, very small. So it's really a call for outright racism. But apparently 20 to 25% of the people are not happy with the regime, and therefore vote on this populist speech.
So in a semi-presidential system like Portugal's, how important is the presidency politically?
Well, the president does not have a lot of powers, but it has crucial powers. It can dissolve the parliament. And in a scenario where nobody really has a majority and where there's three or four large parties, the president may have a very important arbitrator's role. So this is one of the things. The second thing is that the past shows that if a president is popular and knows how to use its powers wisely, it can make life very, very difficult to the government and force the government to negotiate key reforms and policies with him. So it may be very relevant.
So do you expect a broad anti-Ventura mobilization in the February 8th runoff?
Now, all polls indicate that. All polls are clear in the sense that any candidate that would go to the runoff would defeat Ventura, because the expectation is that there will be a polarization of votes, pretty much as it's in France with Ms. Le Pen for a number of years. It is probably what is going to happen in Portugal. All the members of the democratic component of the society that fear the far right reaching power will concentrate their votes against Ventura more than pro Seguro.
Jorge, Ventura has hinted in this run is about testing support for a future prime ministerial bid. How credible is that strategy?
No, this is really the strategy, I believe, and it makes sense. I mean, real power lies in the government, not in the president. So he's trying to accumulate. He's trying to lower the departing point of his electorate, so that and then he will try that there will be elections ASAP if he reaches, for instance, 33% of the votes in the runoff.
So, looking ahead, what are the broader implications of this race for Portugal's political stability and its role in Europe?
Well, no policy will change. I mean, Portugal will continue to be a pro-European, pro-NATO country. It will continue to have a pro-Atlantic posture insofar as that is possible today with the current president of the United States making it difficult. It will continue to endeavor to have a privileged relationship with the Portuguese-speaking countries and to have a broader friendly relation with all the countries in the world. That will not change at all if Seguro is elected president. And even if Ventura is elected president, it will be something. There won't be a great change, in my opinion, in terms of international relations. We will see a clear approach to the speech of Donald Trump. But really, his goal is not to change anything in terms of international relations. His goal is to try to reach for executive power, leading the government in Portugal, not getting to the presidency.
Jorge Costa Oliveira, thank you very much for your insights and for being with us today. Thanks a lot.
It was a pleasure.
After the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev has arrived in the Swiss Confederation to take part in the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. Accompanied by First Lady Mehriban Aliyeva, President was received by Swiss officials upon arrival at Zurich International Airport. The World Economic Forum, renowned for bringing together global leaders, policymakers and business figures, provides a platform for discussing pressing international economic, social and political issues. As global leaders gather in Davos this week to debate the future of security, alliances and economic power, the absence of some countries is as telling as the presence of others. With US President Donald Trump returning to the World Economic Forum amid sweeping geopolitical changes, Georgia's continued exclusion raises questions about mixed messages, diplomatic priorities and growing international isolation. Our correspondent has more from Tbilisi.
The World Economic Forum opens in Davos today under the theme A Spirit of Dialogue, bringing together nearly 3,000 leaders from more than 130 countries at a time of profound geopolitical uncertainty. This year's meeting carries particular significance. US President Donald Trump is participating after years away as Washington signals policy shifts that could reshape global alliances, security arrangements and regional power balances. Davos, once again, is where many of those conversations begin. Georgia, however, will not be part of them. For the second year in a row, Georgia's Prime Minister will not attend the forum, with the government confirming that the country was not invited. Last year, officials said that participation in Davos was not a priority, a position that contrasts sharply with the government's repeated statements about seeking renewed engagement and partnership with the United States. The contradiction has become more visible in recent days. Just last week, speaking at Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze stated that European Union integration remains Georgia's top priority. Yet, Georgia's continued absence from key Western political platforms suggests a widening gap between declared ambitions and diplomatic reality. Davos 2026 is expected to host a record number of political leaders, including heads of state, G7 representatives, senior EU officials, and global business executives. Discussions will focus on geopolitical risk, contested alliances, economic resilience, and the future of global cooperation, precisely the issues shaping Georgia's strategic environment. Analysts note that the isolation is not always declared. It is often reflected in absence. As global power dynamics shift, including deepening cooperation between Russia and Iran, not being present at forums like Davos limits visibility, influence, and the ability to communicate strategic intent directly to key partners. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
Iran's president has issued his strongest warning yet amid heightened tensions with Washington. In a social media post, Masoud Pezeshkian said any attack on Iran's supreme leader would amount to an all-out war as the country emerges from weeks of deadly protests and faces continued sanctions and pressure from the United States.
Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has issued a stark warning that any attack on Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei would be considered a declaration of war against the Iranian nation. He made the statement Sunday in a message posted on social media. The warning comes amid rising tensions with the United States, following President Donald Trump's calls for a change in Iran's leadership. Protests that began peacefully in late December over rising living costs and a collapsing currency escalated into violent clashes, leaving thousands dead and tens of thousands arrested, according to officials and independent monitors. Iranian authorities have blamed foreign interference, particularly from the US, for fueling the unrest. Trump has threatened possible intervention if protesters are killed or executed. Although large street protests have eased and partial internet access has been restored, commercial activity remains subdued as residents remain wary of further escalation. Customer traffic in Tehran's commercial districts is reportedly down. Diplomatic activity continues, with Iran's foreign minister engaging regional counterparts to stress the need for stability, even as Tehran insists it will not tolerate external aggression. Authorities are gradually easing domestic restrictions, with officials saying full nationwide internet access is expected within days.
Syria's government and Kurdish-led forces have agreed to a nationwide ceasefire ending nearly 2 weeks of fighting. The deal integrates Kurdish forces into state institutions and gives Damascus control of key oil, gas and border areas. Meanwhile, Syria's army and the Syrian Democratic Forces report gun battles are underway today.
Syria's government has announced a nationwide ceasefire with the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF. It ends almost 2 weeks of fighting in the northeast. The agreement is part of a 14-point deal. It will integrate the SDF into state institutions and give Damascus control of key regions.
I recommend a complete ceasefire at this time. And I also urge our Arab tribes there to remain calm and peaceful, and to allow for the gradual implementation of the agreement's provisions until we achieve complete peace in Syria.
President Ahmed al-Shara said the deal will restore authority over 3 governorates: Al-Hasaka, Deir ez-Zor and Raqqa. It follows a meeting in Damascus with US Special Envoy Tom Barrack at the weekend, who described the agreement as a step toward a unified Syria. SDF commander Mazloum Abdi said the agreement includes a ceasefire to prevent a wider war and stressed that recent fighting had been imposed on the SDF. Kurdish-led forces have run an autonomous administration in northeastern Syria since the civil war. Under the deal, Damascus will take over civilian institutions, border crossings and oil and gas facilities that sustained Kurdish self-rule. SDF personnel will be integrated into Syria's defense and interior ministries after vetting, while the government assumes responsibility for prisons and detention camps holding foreign IS fighters and their families. The agreement also formally recognizes Kurdish cultural and linguistic rights, giving Kurdish official language status and marking the Kurdish New Year as a national holiday, the first such recognition since Syria's independence in 1946. It also reaffirms Syria's ongoing participation in the US-led coalition against Islamic State.
Turkey is welcoming a new ceasefire agreement in northern Syria following several days of renewed fighting between Syrian government forces and the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces. Ankara says the deal is a critical step toward restoring stability along its southern border. Our correspondent in Istanbul brings us more.
Ankara has welcomed a ceasefire agreement between the Syrian government and the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, after several days of renewed clashes in northern Syria. A Turkish government spokesman described the deal as a critical step toward achieving what he called a terror-free region along Turkey's border. Announced on Sunday by Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, the agreement calls for an immediate halt to hostilities between Syrian government forces and SDF fighters. The deal also stipulates that all Kurdish civilian and military authorities in the area be brought under the control of the central government. U.S. Ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barrack, who also serves as Washington's special envoy for Syria, welcomed the agreement, calling it a pivotal moment. He also noted that key details still needed to be finalized. In a phone call with his Syrian counterpart, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Turkey's support for Damascus would continue to grow, particularly in the field of counterterrorism. Although backed by the United States, Ankara views the SDF as a terrorist organization due to its close links to the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, which for decades waged a violent insurgency against the Turkish state. The ceasefire follows several days of fighting in which Syrian forces reportedly captured a number of SDF-held positions, including key oil facilities. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
A major fire in central Karachi in Pakistan has killed at least 11 people, including a firefighter, and injured at least 20 others. The blaze tore through a shopping center on Saturday, housing around 1,200 shops, leaving them in ruins. Fire crews battled the flames overnight and say around 60 people are still missing. Shop owners describe the fire as a lifetime of work destroyed, as authorities warn the building remains unstable and could still collapse. The cause of the fire is under investigation. The events of 20th January remain one of the most tragic and pivotal moments in Azerbaijan's modern history. Every year, commemorative events are held at home and abroad, with people visiting Mortez Alley to pay their respects. This year, representatives of the diplomatic corps in Azerbaijan visited the memorial to honor those who lost their lives.
The events of 20 January are regarded as one of the significant socio-political episodes in the history of Azerbaijan. On 20 January 1990, following the deployment of Soviet troops into Baku, there were casualties among the civilian population.
The incident caused widespread public reaction in Azerbaijani society and influenced subsequent developments. On the anniversary of the January 20 events, representatives of the diplomatic corps accredited in Azerbaijan visited Mortez Alley in Baku. During the visit, the representatives paid tribute to those who lost their lives and laid wreaths at the memorial. The guests were briefed on the events of January 1990.
It is a very similar story. As you know well, in 1968, the troops of the so-called Warsaw Pact invaded us. Many people lost their lives. We lived under occupation for 20 years and then regained our freedom. That is why this is a shared history, and I feel very deeply about it.
Well, yes, this marks a historic moment for Azerbaijan, and I'm honored to be here to honor the fallen and the fight for independence.
It is noted that the January 20th events are considered an important milestone in Azerbaijan's modern history. Each year on this date, various commemorative events are held both within the country and abroad, and Mortez Alley is visited.
Uzbekistan has begun relocating dozens of environmentally hazardous factories out of Tashkent as part of a nationwide effort to improve air quality and reduce industrial pollution in major cities. Sevil Rajapova has more.
Uzbekistan has launched a large-scale program to relocate environmentally dangerous and energy-intensive industrial enterprises from Tashkent. Under a presidential decree, a special government commission has identified 87 industrial facilities in Tashkent that must be moved outside residential areas. The list includes cement and asbestos plants, leather and footwear factories, metallurgical enterprises, poultry farms and other high-emission producers. The program also covers Nukus and regional centers and will be implemented in stages. One of the enterprises scheduled for relocation is the Ust-Torchu-Med non-ferrous metals plant. Classified as a high-risk ecological facility, it will be transferred to an industrial zone in Jizakh region. Environmental inspections last year recorded several pollution violations at the site. Outdated smelting furnaces will be dismantled and replaced with cleaner equipment, cutting emissions by more than 226 tons a year. The relocation comes as Uzbekistan faces growing environmental pressure. Industrial emissions remain one of the main sources of air pollution, while Tashkent has repeatedly ranked among the cities with the highest concentrations of harmful particles in the region. Officials say the initiative should significantly improve air quality, reduce health risks and create safer living conditions for the residents. It is Sevil Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss renewed clashes in Syria's northeast, the fragile ceasefire and Damascus' push to consolidate control. See you shortly. That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching A News.